A successful billionaire CEO returns to his hometown, only to stumble upon the woman he left behind a decade ago. What was supposed to be just an awkward encounter turns into pure shock when he notices the 10-year-old boy whose hand she's holding. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear it. And if you're enjoying the content, give the video a like to help support the channel. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy the story. The town looked smaller than he remembered. Maybe it always had been, tucked between two hills, with a main street you could walk end to end in 10 minutes. Willow Creek hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same diner, still pretending the coffee was fresh. But Nathan noticed the new banner flapping above the post office. Annual Fall Harvest Fundraiser. Help save our community centre. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd written a check for it last month without blinking, and now he was here in person, pretending it was for some noble reason. Really, he was just tired. Tired of polished boardrooms and polite backstabbing, of people who called him Sir and laughed too loudly at things that weren't funny. 10 years at the top, and somehow none of it felt like enough. He parked his car near the square, far enough not to draw attention, and wandered into the farmer's market, hands in his coat pockets, collar turned up against the wind. He didn't expect to run into anyone he knew, and if he did, he figured they'd give him that tight hometown smile and ask about the weather in New York before retreating to safer conversation. That was fine. He wasn't here to reconnect, just to look, to breathe, to remember what it felt like to want something before he had it. The market was smaller than he'd expected, maybe a dozen stalls, mostly pumpkins, homemade candles, and jars of jam. But there was music playing from someone's portable speaker, and the smell of fried dough drifting from the food cart on the corner brought back a dozen memories all at once. He hadn't even made it halfway down the first row when he saw her. She was standing behind a folding table, stacked with apple hand pies, scribbling prices on a chalkboard, one foot absently nudging a tipped-over crate back into place. Eliza Bennett. She didn't look like someone clinging to the past. Her hair was pulled back in a practical bun, sleeves rolled up, apron dusted with flour. She moved like she belonged there, confident, busy, grounded in a way that hit Nathan somewhere he didn't expect. He stopped walking. For a second, he considered turning around, pretending he didn't see her. But then she looked up. Her expression didn't give much away, just a flicker of surprise, then a pause, then something flatter. Not quite irritation, not quite warmth either. She wiped her hands on her apron and stood straighter. "Well," she said, "look who decided to come back from the clouds." He managed a smile, but it felt uneven. "Didn't think I'd run into anyone I knew." "You mean anyone you left behind?" she said. And it wasn't cruel, just plain. Honest in the way only someone from before your first million could get away with. He didn't answer that. She didn't press. Instead, she turned toward the boy tugging at her sleeve, holding out a half-eaten cookie and asking something Nathan couldn't hear. Eliza leaned down, said something that made him laugh, then ruffled his hair lightly before turning back to the pies. And then Nathan looked at the kid. He was maybe 10, maybe a little younger, with thick brown hair and a stubborn slouch, wearing a hoodie, 2 sizes, too big, and sneakers that had clearly seen a summer of bike rides and dirt. The boy glanced up at Nathan, curious, not shy, and grinned. Something about it hit Nathan sideways. It wasn't just the grin, it was the way it pulled slightly to the left, the way one eyebrow raised higher than the other. It was something he'd seen 100 times in his own reflection, half-conscious details you don't notice until they show up somewhere else. The resemblance wasn't obvious at first, but once you saw it, it was impossible to unsee. He did the math in his head. 10 years. Maybe 11. He'd left town just before summer. Eliza crying in his driveway, telling him she didn't want to be the girl he forgot once the city swallowed him whole. He'd promised that wouldn't happen. Then it did. The boy leaned closer to Eliza, whispered something, and she nodded. He took off toward the caramel corn booth, with $1 clutched in his fist. Nathan watched him go, then turned back to her. Eliza. His voice felt strange in his throat. Who's the kid? She looked at him for a second, weighing something. Then she shrugged, casual, but not quite. That's Jamie. The name hit hard. Simple, normal, but something about it made his stomach turn. Jamie. He repeated the timeline in his head. If Eliza had gotten pregnant after he left, maybe even a few weeks after, yeah, it lined up. He yours? He asked, trying to keep his voice even. There was the slightest pause, barely a second, but it was enough. He's mine, she said. Why? You suddenly interested in local kids now? Nathan didn't push. Not yet. But he felt something shifting inside him, like the ground had moved and he hadn't noticed. He wanted to laugh at himself for the thought, for jumping to conclusions based on a smile and a name, but it wouldn't leave him alone. Jamie, 10. Left town. Eliza, all of it lined up too neatly. You look good, he said, mostly to say something. Her expression stayed unreadable. Same, she said, glancing at his expensive coat and shoes that didn't belong anywhere near hay bales or pumpkin crates. Though you always did dress like you were in a catalogue. I missed the food, he said, nodding at the table. Well, then buy a pie. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a 20, and handed it over. She gave him a box without a word, then turned to help another customer. Just like that, the moment was over. Nathan took a step back, holding the box like it was more important than it was, and let the crowd pull him away. He didn't look back, but his mind kept circling the same thought, slow and persistent. Could he be mine? Nathan left the farmer's market with the pie under his arm, and questions tangled in his head. He didn't eat the pie. Just set it on the passenger seat and drove around town until he ended up parked outside the old high school, watching a group of kids run laps on the field where he'd once tried and failed to make varsity. The place looked smaller now, but time had a way of shrinking things. He told himself he was overthinking it. Maybe Jamie just happened to look like him. Maybe he was grasping at something that wasn't there because the version of his life built on quarterly earnings and board appointments suddenly felt paper thin. Still, the way Eliza had paused, the timing, that smile, it wouldn't leave him alone. He'd planned to head back to the city by Monday, maybe even Sunday night if the dinner dragged. But now, it was Tuesday morning, and he was still here, checking emails from a rented office space above the hardware store, and telling his assistant to cancel everything that could be cancelled. The official story, one he repeated with the calm confidence of a man who'd spent years spinning narratives, was that he was exploring the idea of launching a small-town innovation hub. Plenty of untapped talent in these forgotten places, he'd said to the mayor, who nodded so hard it looked painful. Might as well start somewhere familiar. In truth, the only thing he was evaluating was a kid with a crooked grin, and a mother who barely looked at him unless she had to. He showed up at the bakery the next morning, under the guise of grabbing coffee. Eliza raised one eyebrow when she saw him, wiped her hands on a towel, and nodded at the tray of croissants near the register. Let me guess, she said. You suddenly remembered how much you love gluten. Something like that, he replied, handing her a 10 and refusing change. He lingered longer than anyone buying a pastry had any reason to. Asked a few questions about her flour supplier, commented on the new signage, told her the shop had potential for franchise expansion, which made her snort and shake her head. She didn't tell him to leave, but she didn't offer him a chair either. Jamie came in halfway through the conversation, carrying a backpack too big for his frame and a hand-drawn flyer advertising the school science fair. Eliza handed him a cookie from behind the counter without saying a word, and Jamie muttered thanks before sliding into a stool by the window. Nathan watched the whole thing with quiet interest. "You doing something cool for the fair?" he asked, leaning a little closer. Jamie shrugged, mouth full of chocolate chip. "Probably not. Last year my volcano didn't even smoke." Nathan paused. What if it could do more than smoke? Jamie gave him a sideways glance. "Like what?" "I don't know. Talk? Count down to eruption? Maybe tell bad jokes before it explodes?" The boy perked up just enough for Nathan to take it as permission. They spent the next 3 afternoons in Eliza's garage, huddled over wires, glue, and a sad plastic volcano from a science kit that looked older than Jamie. Nathan had a spare AI chip in his luggage, left over from a pitch demo he'd done in Palo Alto, and couldn't believe how fast Jamie picked things up. The kid asked questions, took notes, got frustrated when things didn't work, and didn't let Nathan touch the glue gun after one unfortunate mess that hardened over the kitchen counter. Eliza mostly hovered nearby, pretending to organize shelves or check emails. She didn't stop them, but she didn't join in either. By the time Friday rolled around, the volcano could speak in 3 languages, light up in sync with a countdown, and puff out a suspiciously realistic cloud of smoke, courtesy of an old vape cartridge Nathan had emptied and repurposed. The fire alarm went off during their last test run, sending the family cat skittering into the bathroom and Eliza racing down the stairs with a fire extinguisher. She didn't say anything, just opened a window and looked at Nathan like he was a storm she hadn't prepared for. At the fair, Jamie stood next to his project, with a level of pride that made something tight lodge in Nathan's chest. A group of parents gathered around, impressed, laughing when the volcano declared in a robotic voice, "Brace yourselves, this one's gonna be spicy." One of the PTA moms asked if Jamie's dad was in tech. Before the boy could answer, Nathan stepped forward with a grin and said, "He's just got a great team." Eliza didn't correct him. She didn't say anything at all. Later, when the crowd thinned and the volunteers started cleaning up, Nathan found himself standing beside her in the parking lot. Jamie had run off to show his ribbon to a classmate, bouncing with more energy than Nathan had seen all week. The sun was setting, casting long shadows on the pavement. "He's smart," Nathan said quietly. "Curious, good with tools." Eliza nodded. "Takes after his uncle." There was a beat of silence. "I keep looking at him," Nathan said, "trying to figure out if it's just in my head or if there's actually something there." She didn't respond right away. Her arms were crossed, but not defensive, more like she was holding something steady. "He looks a lot like me," Nathan added, careful but not casual. This time, she turned toward him, lips twitching just slightly, not quite a smile, but something close. "Yeah, I guess he does." She didn't say more, didn't confirm, didn't deny. And Nathan, for reasons he didn't fully understand, didn't push. He drove back to his rental house with the windows down, trying to sort through the mix of hope, confusion, and something dangerously close to longing that had crept into his chest. He told himself he'd stay just another few days, long enough to help Jamie fine-tune the volcano for nationals maybe, long enough to see if Eliza would let that smile turn into something more. Just a little longer, then he'd go, probably. Nathan kept telling himself he'd leave next week. Then it became the end of the month. By the 3rd week, he had a full schedule of completely fabricated meetings, a made-up pitch deck for the Willow Creek Innovation Project, and a growing collection of school flyers stuck to the fridge of the house he was renting near the lake. He didn't mind the noise anymore, the kids shouting after school, the occasional bark of a neighbour's dog, the smell of burnt leaves in the air. After years of spotless floors and perfectly managed calendars, it was all surprisingly bearable, even comforting. He had no idea what he was doing. That didn't stop him. The telescope came first. Jamie had pointed one out in a magazine he was flipping through at the bakery, and by the next morning, Nathan had it delivered. It wasn't the cheap one, either. It came in 5 boxes and required 3 YouTube tutorials to assemble. They set it up in Eliza's backyard on a night that was too cloudy to see anything, but Jamie stayed out there for 2 hours anyway, bundled in a jacket and trying to find Mars. A few days later, Nathan showed up at Jamie's school with tickets to a minor league game. Not just tickets, front row, dugout access, and a limo idling in the pickup lane like it had taken a wrong turn from some red carpet event. Jamie nearly dropped his backpack. Eliza stared at the limo like it was radioactive. "Nathan," she said under her breath, "what are you doing?" "Taking him to a game," he said, already holding the door open. "It's just baseball." "It's a parade, float with doors." He looked genuinely confused. "You think he'll like it?" Jamie definitely liked it. He didn't stop talking the entire ride. Nathan let him order 2 hot dogs and cotton candy, and when a foul ball bounced into their section, Nathan caught it and handed it to him without a word. It was one of the first quiet moments between them that didn't feel awkward. Eliza met them in the driveway when they got back. She didn't yell, didn't even frown, just thanked him flatly and walked Jamie inside, tossing him a quick smile before closing the door behind them. Nathan stood there a minute, not sure if he should feel proud or like he'd overstepped. The next day, he offered to volunteer at the school. He told the principal he wanted to give back and connect with future innovators, which sounded convincing enough to earn him a badge and a slot in the computer lab every Thursday. The 3rd graders liked him immediately. He brought in old robotics parts and let them take apart gadgets he didn't even remember owning. One girl told him he had the best hair of any grown-up in the school. He considered it his first real award. But the curriculum was another story. He didn't understand half of it, and he definitely couldn't explain long division in a way that didn't end with kids crying. After his 2nd visit, the teacher gently asked if he could stick to tech stuff. He agreed. Meanwhile, the bakery was falling apart. Eliza kept the front tidy, but Nathan noticed the flickering lights, the broken oven she didn't complain about, the stack of bills she thought he wasn't looking at when she opened the register. She wasn't asking for help. He offered anyway. First, it was a new oven, quietly installed after he accidentally sent the wrong one to his cabin and needed somewhere to store it. Then it was signage, delivered by a graphic designer friend who happened to owe him a favor. He sponsored the fall cleanup event in town and named her bakery as the official refreshment partner. She rolled her eyes when she found out, but she didn't tell him to stop. They started spending more time together, usually under the pretense of Jamie planning his school project, reviewing bakery inventory, reorganizing the garage. Nathan made jokes that mostly landed, and Eliza gave him a hard time for being terrible at sweeping, which he didn't deny. One afternoon, they ended up repainting the bakery's front door together, and halfway through, she smudged a streak of blue on his cheek. He retaliated with a dab on her arm. She threatened him with the whole paintbrush. It didn't go further than that, but for a few seconds, it felt like it could. That night, Nathan lay awake longer than usual. He wasn't sure what he wanted, or maybe he was. Eliza didn't say much when they were alone. She let him talk, let Jamie fill the silence, but when the boy went to bed, she usually went back to washing dishes or balancing the register. One night, he caught her staring through the window after Jamie had gone upstairs. She looked tired, not just physically, like she'd been carrying something for a long time. He wanted to ask what, but didn't. Instead, he said, "You're doing a good job with him." She didn't answer right away. Then, without turning, she said, "He's a good kid. That helps." "He's more than that." She gave a small shrug. "Still doesn't make me any less behind on rent. I can help with that." "I know," she said, not unkindly. "That's the problem." They didn't talk about it again. But she didn't stop him when he replaced the mixer or stocked her pantry with supplies she hadn't ordered. And still, each time Jamie laughed at one of Nathan's dumb jokes or leaned into his side at the movies, Eliza would glance over, quickly, quietly, and look away just as fast. There was a night, close to the end of the month, when Jamie fell asleep on the couch between them after a movie. Eliza lifted him gently and motioned for Nathan to grab the blanket. They covered him together, standing over the small body stretched out like he owned the room. Nathan looked down and felt something twist in his chest. "He's happy," he said softly. Eliza's voice barely rose above a whisper. "He is." But she didn't smile. And for the first time, Nathan wondered if she was waiting for the moment it would all fall apart. It had started with a joke. Nathan was dropping Jamie off at school one morning, the kid rattling on about how his friend Carter had a trampoline at his birthday party and a cotton candy machine, and wouldn't it be cool if they did something even bigger? Nathan, only half listening, said, "Maybe we should throw you a party with a magician and drone races and cupcakes with your face on them." Jamie's laugh had been loud and unfiltered. That was all it took. By the end of the week, Nathan had rented the entire rec center, hired a local illusionist who had done weddings and small-time commercials, ordered enough cupcakes to feed an army, and arranged for a fenced-in drone obstacle course behind the building. There was a banner with Jamie's name on it, stretching across the basketball court, balloons that spelled out 11 in enormous silver numbers, and a DJ playing clean pop songs at a volume that made conversation difficult. Eliza had pushed back, of course. "It's too much," she said, standing in the bakery's walk, in fridge, where she thought he'd be less inclined to argue. "He doesn't need all this." "It's not about what he needs," Nathan said. "It's one day that he remembers for the rest of his life. He'd remember it either way." "But this way," Nathan said. "He remembers being celebrated, really celebrated." She'd stared at him for a long time, weighing something. Then, finally, with a quiet exhale, said, "All right, but no live animals." Nathan had agreed, though only because the magician's rabbit had already backed out. The day of the party, Jamie was electric. He ran from one activity to the next, like someone had wound him too tightly. All his classmates were there. The cupcakes were a hit, mostly for the novelty of eating their friend's face, and the magician managed to make a soccer ball disappear in front of 30 screaming kids. Parents mingled near the punch table, some recognizing Nathan from local news stories, others asking about his tech incubator plans. Nathan smiled, answered questions, and kept an eye on Jamie the entire time. Then it happened. They were standing near the drone course, Jamie sweaty and beaming after winning a timed race. Nathan handed him a towel and told him he did great. Jamie looked up, still catching his breath, and said, "Thanks, Dad." No hesitation, no second thought. Just said it, like it had always been true. Nathan froze, not visibly. He kept smiling, even laughed a little, but something in him went still, He looked over at Eliza across the room. She'd heard it. Her smile didn't falter, but her hand clenched around the paper cup she was holding. He didn't say anything about it, just put a hand on Jamie's shoulder and steered him toward the food table. Then Greg showed up. Nathan noticed him right away, unshaven, slouched, swaying a little, as he made his way into the gym, like someone who hadn't been invited but didn't care. Eliza's expression shifted as soon as she saw him, moving through surprise to dread without stopping. She crossed the floor fast, intercepting him before he got near the kids. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I came to see my son," he said, breath sharp with the unmistakable sting of cheap liquor. "You're late," she said, "and you're not welcome here like this." "Didn't know there was a dress code," he muttered, scanning the room. His gaze landed on Nathan, then on Jamie, then back again. "Is that him?" he asked, louder. "That your new guy?" Nathan had started walking toward them the moment he heard the voice. He reached them just as Greg said, "Let me guess. He's the one playing daddy now." "Greg, don't," Eliza warned, but it was too late. Nathan stopped a few feet away. "You need to leave." Greg snorted. "Why? You gonna throw me out? You think just 'cause you've got money and a fancy coat, you get to step in and take my kid?" Jamie was watching now. Other people too. Conversations quieted. "You think you're the dad," Greg said, voice rising. "Eliza never told you the truth, huh?" The room turned cold. Nathan looked at Eliza. Her face had gone blank. Greg laughed, short and ugly. "He's not yours. Not even close." Nathan didn't say anything. Didn't move. Eliza took Greg's arm, pulled him aside, muttered something too low to hear. He barked back a reply, then finally turned and walked out, pushing open the double doors so hard they banged against the wall. Nathan looked at Jamie, who was standing frozen by the drink table, clutching a juice box. Then he followed Eliza out into the hallway. She didn't speak right away, just stood there with her arms crossed, looking at the floor. Nathan waited. Finally, she said, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." He stayed quiet. "When you came back, I didn't think you'd stay. And then Jamie liked you, and you were so good with him, and I just," she exhaled sharply, "I should have told you a long time ago." He felt like he was watching something collapse from the inside out. "I had a rebound," she said, "after you left. It didn't last. I didn't even think I could get pregnant, but then I was. And by the time I knew, you were already long gone." He closed his eyes. "And when you showed up again," she went on, "and you saw him, I didn't mean to let you believe it. I just didn't know how to say no when you kept stepping in. And then Jamie started calling you dad, and I didn't want to take that from him. He's never had that. Not really." She looked at him then, and her voice cracked a little. "I needed help, but I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't know how to stop it once it started." Nathan didn't respond. She didn't ask for forgiveness. He turned and walked away, back through the doors, past the banner and the magician packing up his gear. Jamie ran to him, confused, asking what had happened, but Nathan only crouched down, told him the party was over and that his mom would take him home soon. Then he stood, nodded once at Eliza without meeting her eyes, and left. Outside, the air was sharp and dry. Nathan kept walking, fast and without direction, the sound of Jamie's voice still bouncing in his head. "Thanks, Dad." He didn't know where he was going, just that he had to keep moving. Nathan didn't pack much when he left Willow Creek, just a bag and the same silence he'd carried since the party. He drove through the night, not stopping until he hit the city, where everything was louder, faster, and perfectly indifferent to what had happened in that gym. The condo was just as he'd left it. Spotless, sterile, the kind of place designed to impress people who never stayed long. He dropped the bag in the hallway, ignored the blinking light on the security panel, and went straight to bed. He didn't sleep. Days passed. He answered no calls from Eliza. Not that she made many. He didn't block her. He just let the silence grow until it filled the space between them completely. Jamie didn't have his number, which made things easier and harder at the same time. At work, he showed up on time, but he was never really there. His assistant noticed first he missed an internal meeting, then forgot the name of a key investor on a call with the London office. The final straw came when he skipped an earnings briefing entirely, leaving a dozen board members staring at an empty chair while the CFO tried to cover. That afternoon, his assistant knocked on his glass door, notepad in hand, and asked if everything was all right. He said it was. She didn't believe him. He buried himself in spreadsheets and numbers that didn't mean anything, shuffled priorities around like that might help shift something inside him. It didn't. The days blurred. Nights were worse. No matter how tired he was, sleep never came easy. His mind kept replaying Jamie's voice. "Thanks, Dad." Then Greg's face. Then Eliza's words. "I didn't mean to lie. I just didn't know how to stop it once it started." Back in Willow Creek, Eliza had stopped hoping to hear from him after the first week. She tried to pretend she was fine, that she hadn't ruined everything, but the bakery felt emptier now. Nathan had quietly pulled his name from the vendor forms. The new supplier cancelled a pending delivery. The check he'd written for the oven didn't bounce, but the invoice for the signage never got paid. She didn't blame him. Not really. She told herself she deserved the fallout. But it didn't make it easier to carry. Jamie asked about him every day at first, then every other day, then not at all. But he stopped smiling the way he used to. He went through his routines quietly, stayed in his room more, kept his drawings in a neat pile instead of taping them to the fridge like before. When he finally asked where Nathan went, Eliza said he had work in the city. She said it casually, like it was always temporary. He nodded without looking up. 2 weeks after the party, she sold her old guitar online. A few days after that, a box of first edition cookbooks disappeared from the bookshelf, listed quietly on a resale app and shipped to buyers who'd never know their significance. Rent was coming due again, and even with the oven fixed, business was still slow. Some of her regulars stopped showing up. Others asked polite questions about Nathan, which she dodged with small smiles and vague answers. One night, while folding laundry, Jamie came into the room holding a birthday card he'd drawn, but never gave Nathan. A scribbled picture of a volcano and a telescope, with the words, "Best Dad, Maybe," written in thick blue marker across the front. He handed it to her without a word. She tried to smile. He didn't wait for her to say anything, just turned and walked back to his room. Later, as she stood at the sink, elbows resting on the counter, she heard his voice behind her. Soft, hesitant. "I think I messed up." She turned slowly. Jamie was standing in the doorway, looking down at his feet. "I shouldn't have called him that," he said. "That's probably why he left." Eliza moved toward him before she could think. She knelt and wrapped her arms around him, holding tight even as his body stayed stiff in her arms. "No," she said. "That's not why. I made it weird. You didn't do anything wrong." He pulled back a little, his voice small. "Are you mad at him?" "No," she said. "I'm mad at myself." They stood there like that, the house too quiet, her throat aching. Jamie eventually went back to bed, but the weight of what he said didn't lift. She stayed up long after, staring at the blank TV screen, running over every decision she'd made since Nathan walked back into their lives. She hadn't planned to let him believe the lie, but she hadn't corrected him either. And now, Jamie thought he was the reason everything fell apart. That thought settled deeper than anything else had. It wasn't about Nathan anymore. It wasn't about guilt or pride or hurt. It was about Jamie, the one person who'd never asked for any of this. The next morning, she opened the laptop Nathan had fixed for Jamie and started typing. The message wasn't long. She didn't beg or explain too much. She didn't ask him to come back. She just said Jamie missed him, that he'd said something that hurt to hear, that he believed he'd ruined everything. She hit send before she could second-guess it. Nathan saw the email just after midnight, when he was still at the office, the only one left. The building was quiet, lights dimmed. He read it twice, then leaned back in his chair and stared at the ceiling. He didn't reply, not right away. But something in him cracked a little, just enough for the silence to stop feeling like control and start feeling like punishment. For the first time in weeks, he clicked out of his spreadsheets, shut the laptop, and left the office without checking his phone. The city lights looked dimmer than usual on the drive home. When he got there, he didn't go straight to bed. He walked to the kitchen, stood in the middle of it, and stayed there a long time. The next morning, he bought a train ticket. She hadn't meant to drive all the way. The plan was just to send the email, maybe wait a few days, see if he replied. But by the second afternoon, after another awkward breakfast with Jamie and a bakery shift where she dropped a tray of scones because her hands wouldn't stop shaking, Eliza grabbed her keys, filled the tank, and started heading south. Somewhere around the third hour, after the podcasts and radio static gave up on distracting her, she realized she'd been practicing the same opening sentence over and over under her breath. I didn't come to fix anything. I just need to say some things. Then she'd try it another way. I didn't do this to hurt you. I just froze. And again, he misses you, Nathan. That's all. Traffic got worse the closer she got to the city, and by the time she parked a block from his building, her nerves were wound tight. The concierge at the desk recognized his name immediately and called up. "He's in," the man said, then handed her a guest badge with a neutral expression. Maybe she wasn't the first woman to show up without an invitation. Maybe he didn't care. She took the elevator alone, clutching her purse like it could anchor her. When the doors opened to the penthouse floor, she hesitated. Then she walked the short hallway and knocked 3 times. It took a minute for him to answer. When he did, he looked like someone who hadn't been expecting anyone, especially not her. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves pushed up, and there was a ring from a coffee mug on the paper in his hand. He didn't smile. Didn't look angry either. Just tired. "Hi," she said quietly. He didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let her in. The space was as sleek and expensive as she'd imagined. Clean lines, tall windows, everything in neutral colours that looked like they came from a catalogue she'd never afford. She stood just past the doorway, taking it in, then finally turned to him. "I'm not here to argue," she said. "I'm not here to apologise, exactly, either." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't interrupt. I need you to hear a few things, then you can tell me to leave." He nodded once and sat down on the edge of the couch, giving her space. She stayed standing. "When you came back, I didn't expect anything. I'd just figured out how to keep the business barely running. Jamie was doing okay in school. Things were manageable. Then you showed up, and it was like you flipped a switch." He lit up. I hadn't seen him that happy in. She stopped herself. "He really believed you were meant to be there. And when you didn't ask if he was yours, I just let it happen." Nathan looked down at his hands. She kept going. I didn't do it to trap you, or to get anything out of you. I didn't think past the next minute, honestly. Every day, I thought I'd tell you, and then something would happen, and I'd think, just one more day. Let him have this. Let you have it too. She moved to the window, letting her fingers brush the edge of the glass before turning back. I'm not proud of it, but I also don't regret what you gave him. You were good to him. He needed that. I didn't realize how badly until you left again. Still, he said nothing. His silence wasn't angry, but she could feel the weight of it pressing between them. I'm not here to ask you to come back, she said finally. I just wanted you to know that you mattered. To him. Even if none of it was the way it should have been. That landed. She could tell, not from any big shift in his face, but from the way he let out a slow breath and looked away like something in his chest had loosened. I know I don't have the right to ask anything, she said, voice quieter now. But he thinks he did something wrong, and I don't know how to fix that. Nathan stood slowly, walked past her to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and leaned against the counter. When he finally looked at her again, his voice was calm. Do you think I would have walked away if I'd known the truth from the beginning? She hesitated. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe not, but you deserve the choice. He nodded once, then set the glass down. I don't hate you. She blinked, caught off guard. I'm angry, confused. I feel stupid, but I don't hate you. She nodded, because she didn't know what to say. He didn't walk her out, just said, take care of him, and turned back to the kitchen. She left without another word. That night, Jamie fell asleep early, worn out from a school project and 2 rounds of dishes at the bakery. Eliza sat on the porch, hands wrapped around a mug that had gone cold hours ago, watching cars pass on the distant road. She didn't know if the visit had helped. She didn't expect a response. It was out of her hands now. But the next morning, Jamie woke to the blinking light on the landline, the kind of old voicemail system that always made him feel important when it beeped. He hit play. Hey kiddo, the voice said. I've got 2 extra tickets to the zoo. Know anyone who'd want to come with me? Jamie stared at the phone for a second, then called out, Mom, before rushing down the hallway with bare feet slapping the floor. Eliza met him halfway. He held the receiver out with both hands, face lit up. She didn't say anything, just nodded. Can we go? He asked. Please? Get dressed, she said. I'll drive. The zoo trip hadn't fixed anything. Not exactly. But it had opened a door, and Nathan stepped through it carefully, without expecting much on the other side. He'd waited by the entrance, pacing between the benches, and glancing at his phone every minute or two, wondering if Eliza had changed her mind. But then Jamie came running through the gate, holding a map and rattling off facts about meerkats like nothing had happened. Nathan wasn't sure if the boy actually believed they were picking up where they left off, or if he'd just decided not to ask questions. Either way, Nathan didn't press. They spent 3 hours wandering through exhibits, talking about animal diets and building the perfect bug-proof tent for a fictional camping trip. Eliza tagged along in the background, sometimes walking beside them, sometimes letting the space between them stretch. At one point, she handed Nathan a bottle of water without a word and nodded toward the shaded bench. That was the closest thing to a truce they exchanged that day. What came next wasn't dramatic. Nathan didn't move back. He didn't make declarations. He simply returned the next weekend. Then again the weekend after that. Sometimes he brought takeout. Sometimes he showed up with a book Jamie might like, or a new socket wrench for the bakery's stubborn back door. He stopped staying overnight, but he lingered longer, and gradually things began to shift. Jamie started asking for help with homework again, usually when Eliza was elbow deep in dough or on the phone with suppliers. Nathan learned how to say, "I don't know," without shame, and instead of reaching for his credit card or calling in an expert, he pulled up tutorials and sat beside Jamie as they figured things out together. When the new science project came up, a working windmill made from recycled materials, Nathan didn't offer to buy a kit. He emptied boxes from his own office and brought over parts from old prototypes. They burned out a motor on the first try, snapped a blade on the second. By the fourth version, the thing turned steadily, even on low wind. Jamie was proud of it. Nathan was too, not because it worked, but because it didn't at first, and they kept going anyway. With Eliza, things were slower. No more long stares across the room. No more late-night chats pretending not to mean anything. Their conversations stayed short, often logistical, sometimes clipped. But there was something honest about it now, and that honesty softened the edge that had been there before. One afternoon, Nathan offered to look at the bakery's plumbing, having noticed the sink wasn't draining right. Eliza didn't argue. She just handed him the wrench and went back to the front counter. He got soaked halfway through and ended up crawling out from under the sink with water dripping down his back, muttering about whoever installed the pipes needing to be legally banned from touching tools. Eliza laughed, handed him a towel, and said nothing else. Later that week, she invited him to stay for dinner. Just leftovers, she clarified, and only because Jamie asked. They ate quietly, and after Jamie went to bed, Nathan stayed behind to help load the dishwasher. No lingering looks, no accidental brushes of the hand. Just plates, hot water, and two people trying not to slip into old patterns too quickly. A few nights later, Jamie convinced Nathan to come to the bakery on Saturday morning and help with customers, which turned into him wearing a paper hat and pouring coffee for confused regulars, while Jamie worked the cash register like a mini manager. When Mrs. Ball, Greeley, one of the older customers, asked who Nathan was, Jamie cheerfully announced, "He's my friend." He used to think the earth was shaped like a Dorito. Nathan nearly choked on his coffee. Eliza didn't stop laughing for a solid 2 minutes. The rhythm between them, whatever it was, grew steadier after that. Nathan still had a foot in the city, but more and more it felt like he was half commuting from somewhere that actually mattered. His assistant started rescheduling meetings to Friday mornings so he could drive out that afternoon. He spent Sunday evenings back at the office, catching up on reports with a little less anxiety and a little more clarity. He hadn't meant for Eliza to help him see his work differently, but somehow the way she talked about her customers, her product, even the stress of making rent, it all reminded him what the job was supposed to mean before he buried it in expansion strategy and investor forecasts. One afternoon, she told him about a new grant opportunity, just enough to cover an industrial mixer and some safety upgrades. He offered to help write the proposal. They worked on it in the back office for hours, elbows touching now and then, but never staying there. They didn't talk about what any of it meant. They just worked. It was enough. By the time fall settled in for good, Nathan had become a regular fixture. Jamie asked him to come to the school art show, where he displayed a painting of the windmill and got embarrassed when Nathan asked too many questions about the brush technique. Eliza stood in the back, arms crossed, smiling faintly when Jamie shushed them both for talking during announcements. There was no grand moment, no scene where they finally admitted anything out loud. But one night, after a quiet dinner, Nathan offered to take out the trash, and Eliza didn't just nod. She handed him a second bag, then leaned against the counter and watched him go. That was it. Just that. A quiet exchange, not a declaration, but it felt like something had clicked into place. Not completely, but enough to keep moving forward. Jamie, for his part, didn't ask if Nathan was staying for good. He didn't call him Dad again. But he did slip a new drawing into Nathan's bag one night, a sketch of the three of them standing in front of the bakery under a crooked sign that said, Family Day. Nathan didn't say anything about it. He just pinned it to the wall beside his desk when he got home, right between a patent diagram and a photo of Willow Creek's main street at dusk. Then he sat down and got back to work. The morning of Family Day was colder than expected. Nathan had driven in the night before and crashed on the pullout in Eliza's office at the bakery, half out of practicality, half because it felt less presumptuous than taking the spare bedroom. He and Eliza didn't talk much that evening, both of them too worn out from the week, but the silence had felt natural instead of heavy. He made coffee in the morning while she prepped a tray of muffins, and they moved around each other like people who had finally figured out the right distance to keep. Jamie had been buzzing about the event for days. His class had worked on poster projects about community, and the teacher had invited parents and family to attend short presentations and join in group games afterward. Nathan had planned to stay on the sidelines, just there to support, maybe take pictures and sneak out when the attention turned toward awkward adult introductions. But Jamie had other plans. In the school parking lot, kids sprinted past, holding craft supplies and half-crushed juice boxes. Nathan carried a plate of still-warm muffins, while Eliza balanced a folder of Jamie's drawings and a scarf Jamie insisted was too itchy to wear. Inside the classroom, they were greeted with a chaos only third graders could generate. Tables covered in glue sticks and glitter, chairs askew, a playlist of pop songs playing too loud from someone's phone. Jamie beamed when he saw them. He pulled Nathan straight to the front, barely giving him time to set the muffins down before announcing, "You're giving the talk, right?" Nathan blinked. "What talk?" "The talk about work and stuff. Miss Jennings said you were coming. You said you'd think about it, and then you never said no." Eliza shot him a look over Jamie's shoulder. Nathan gave the smallest shrug possible. "Right," he said. "The talk." 10 minutes later, he stood at the front of the room with a laminated name tag and absolutely no idea what he was going to say. The teacher gave him an encouraging nod. A few parents clapped politely. Jamie sat in the first row, with his hands folded and the kind of smile people reserve for talent show performances they helped choreograph. Nathan cleared his throat and rested his hands on the edge of a child-sized desk. "I'm Nathan," he started. "I build things for a living, mostly software, some hardware, sometimes companies when I'm feeling overly ambitious." There were a few quiet chuckles. "But that's not really why I'm here. Jamie invited me. And when Jamie invites you to something, you don't say no. Not if you've got any sense." More laughs now, from kids and adults both. "I came back to Willow Creek for what I thought would be a weekend. I'd been gone 10 years. I had a list of reasons to leave and no good excuse to come back. But I showed up anyway, and then I met a kid who reminded me what curiosity looks like when it's not attached to a deadline, and I remembered what it feels like to want to build something that doesn't fit on a spreadsheet." He paused for a moment, catching Eliza's eye briefly before continuing. "I've spent a lot of time chasing things that sound important. Titles, investors, numbers that go up, and I won't pretend those things don't matter. But lately, I've been thinking more about second chances. About showing up even when you're late. About the kind of work that doesn't end when the office closes." There was a quiet in the room now, not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. "So, if I've got any advice to give, it's this. Don't wait too long to ask yourself what really matters. And when you find it, stick with it, even if you screw it up a few times first." There was real applause this time, and not just from the parents. Jamie beamed. Then came the introductions, and each kid stood up with their adult to share their posters. Most were messy collages of crayons and magazine clippings. Jamie's featured stick figures standing in front of the bakery, a telescope, and what appeared to be a glittery volcano. When it was his turn, he pointed at the drawing and said, "This is my mom, and this is Nathan. He used to be my maybe dad, but now he's just my always there Nathan." The class laughed. Nathan blinked hard and looked at the ceiling for a second, longer than necessary. That night, after the school had emptied out and the last of the muffins had been distributed to hungry teachers, Nathan stayed to help Eliza clean up the bakery. Jamie had passed out on the couch in the back, clutching his art folder like it held something fragile. When they were done sweeping, Eliza stepped onto the porch and held the door open. Nathan followed, both of them standing in the quiet, the cold air soft on their skin. The street was nearly empty. Above them, the stars were faint, but still visible. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, it was quiet. "I spent most of my life thinking about legacy, about what I'd leave behind, but I think I was just trying to matter to people who were never going to remember me." She looked over at him, not pressing, just waiting. "I'm tired of being impressive," he said. "I want to be useful, present. I want to help fix things, even if it's just a leaky pipe or a third-grade science project." She smiled, small and real. "That's a new mission statement." He turned slightly toward her. "You asked me once what mattered to me." She nodded. He reached out, slowly, not assuming, and took her hand. "This," he said, "you, him, all of it, if you'll have me, for real, this time." She squeezed his hand just once. "Only if you do the bakery's taxes." He laughed, almost startled, and she joined him. It was the kind of laughter that didn't need to be held back. Nothing about it was cautious. They stood like that a while, no need to say anything more. Nothing left between them but the truth. No fantasy, no pretending, just a choice. And both of them, finally, ready to make it. If this story touched you, don't forget to like the video. It helps the channel more than you know. Want more heartfelt stories like this? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Let me know how this one made you feel. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.